Hey y'all, welcome back to Southwest Victory Gardens, your resource for organic gardening here in the desert Southwest. My name is Brandon, and on this channel we talk all about desert gardening, so thanks for checking out this video. If you're new to this channel, we've been doing a series of videos on drip irrigation, and we're going to continue that series today by showing you some different methods for connecting drip emitters to half-inch polytube. So, if you're new to drip irrigation, one of the most common methods for watering plants in desert landscapes is to run spaghetti tubing from half-inch poly over to your plants. Now, from left to right, you can see we have different emitters here. The blue on the left puts out a half gallon of water per hour, and the green on the right puts out 10 gallons of water per hour. Using these different emitters, we can water different plants in our landscape that have different watering requirements. All right, so here we have our different emitters, our different barbed fittings. I'm going to recommend a couple tools for you when you're doing any kind of drip irrigation work. It's going to make your life just a whole lot easier. The first is needle nose pliers. Needle nose pliers work really well at taking out any broken emitters that might happen as you're installing your system. You can really get in and sort of grab like in the corners and like pry little things out of there. And it also works really well at getting emitters into the tubing. So if you're having trouble pushing emitters into the tubing or taking emitters or goof plugs out of the tubing, needle nose pliers are going to be really your best friend. Some kind of cutting tool. This is a tool that's used specifically for cutting PVC and irrigation. So if you got something like that, I strongly recommend it. But you can use scissors or even hand pruners or something like that to do any of the cutting. And lastly, you're going to need some kind of what I call a pokey. And a pokey is basically just a barb tool that we're going to use to actually poke holes into our poly tube so that we can insert our emitters. So I have a variety of different pokies here. They all work basically the same way. So if you notice on our emitters, on our 2-gallon emitter or 10 or 5, every emitter, there's one side that has the colored plastic, which tells us what water or gallon per hour output is there, and then on the other side you have a barbed fitting. So that black barb fitting should always go into the poly tubing or towards the pipe. So the water should be coming from this direction. So we don't ever want to have our water coming into the colored part of our emitters, because that's going to cause some problems. So if we want to connect our emitter to our mainline poly tube, the easiest and most simple way to do that is to simply use the barb on the end of the emitter as the barb that connects to the poly tube. So we're going to poke a hole right here. I like that poppy noise. Now I'm going to use my needle nose pliers to get this in here, just like that. Okay, so now we have this emitter in polytube. It's solid, it's connected, it's not coming out. All right, and this is now going to put out 2 gallons of water per hour from this emitter. And so to this emitter, I can now connect my spaghetti tube, which can go out into my landscape somewhere. So anywhere into my landscape, I can direct this tube underground, and 2 gallons of water are going to come out of this drip, 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 drip. Okay, so that is the most basic way that we can hook up our spaghetti tubing to an emitter to our main poly line. But we have all these different Barb connectors, and depending on the situation, there are different ways that we can connect these. So let me show you another way that's really common. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a hole, just like before. Now, instead of using a barb on the end of our emitter, like this barb here, we're going to use a barbed 1/4-inch barb straight fitting. And we're going to use that. We're going to insert that into our main line, just like that. Now we're going to connect our poly tube like so. And instead of putting the emitter into the poly tube, now we're going to put it in line somewhere of our tube. And then it's going to come out this way, like that. Okay, so now we have the emitter in the middle of the line. So from here to here is full pressure, and from here to here is going to be 2 gallons per hour. So now when we do it this way, you see we have an extra fitting here. We have a 1/4 inch barb and then our emitter, whereas here we just have our emitter. So this, we're using extra plastic, we're using an extra piece, but it's just an alternate way that we can install our emitters. All right, so now let me show you one more way that is really common. And this is probably one of the most common ways that you're going to see these emitters, but it's the wrong way, and it's the way that you should really try and avoid. So let's poke another hole. All right, and we're going to use our same 1/4 inch barb. So it's going to use one extra piece of plastic that we don't need. Then we're going to run our straight line spaghetti tube from our barb. Apologies to anyone named Barbara. Okay, and now we're going to pretend that this line runs up to our soil surface, and we're going to put in our 2-gallon emitter at the very tip of the line, and we're going to leave it just like that. So if you ever go to a landscape and you see this part, the emitter above the ground, this is what you have, right? And so someone's elected to put that emitter above the ground so that you can see how much water is coming out. Now, this way and this way are basically the same, right? You're getting the same amount of water, right? But on this way, you have a lot less likelihood that you're gonna get clogging of your emitter. Because if any dirt or sediment or anything gets into this, because it's above ground, then you're going to have clogging issues, you're going to have a lot of problems with this over time. Whereas this way, if anything gets into here, you can, just unclog it, you can cut the line a little bit. There's a lot of different ways that you can, clean that out. So you can see here 3 different ways to hook up the same emitter, right? And so I'm going to recommend this way here, where you have your emitter goes right into your poly tubing with that barb that's on the barbed end of the emitter, and then you just run a straight line out. And if you want to know how much water is coming out, you can simply do a little test where you count the drips and it'll tell you how much water is coming out. All right, now let me show you one last way that we can hook up, and that's using a special type of barb fitting called a valve. This is a ball valve, basically. So what we can do is control the water coming in and out of our line using this little valve that's located in line of our irrigation tube. So we're going to pop another hole here. Hopefully we can still see. And we're going to put our valve in this way. And now we can run an irrigation line. Our spaghetti tube. We can put our inline emitter, 2 gallons here, and then keep going this way. All right, so now we have an inline valve, and what this does is when the arrow is pointed this way, we're getting full water stream. And when the arrow is pointing this way, it's sideways, we get no water coming out. All right, so now we can control even more. Let's say we put it halfway and we can control how much water is coming out. Or let's say we just don't want to have this emitter working anymore. Maybe the plant died or something. Well, we can go ahead and turn that off. And now no water is going to come out of here, right? And so instead of plugging this up, you can just leave that off. Okay, so this is another type of way to do it. All right, so now you can splice and, and run these lines all different ways using all of the different, connectors here. If you make a mistake, we have something called a Goof Plug, and this has a fat side and a skinny side. If you're plugging the end of a line like this, you'll use the skinny side, and that will plug up a line just like that. If you're plugging a hole in your poly tube, let's say you made a mistake, then you're going to use the fat side. You're going to use your needle nose pliers with the fat side. Pop that in just like that, and now we have a plug. All right, so you can see 4 different ways to hook up our emitters. None of them are necessarily wrong or right, but I will say that I prefer this method. I think this uses the least amount of materials, and it's also the least likely to get clogged. So because of that, I like this method the most, and this method the least, where we have our emitter above the soil level and you can actually see the different colors of the emitters. So, so that's just the basics of your tubing and how you're going to want to do the basic hookup. You know, you can use the different color emitters to different plants. So obviously you're going to use, you know, the blue half-gallon for things like cactus and succulents, and you're going to use the green 10 gallons for things like trees and, you know, things that require a lot of water use. Now this emitter here, you definitely never want to do this method, because this actually will shoot water out like in a straight line. So you have to do either this method here or a method like this where you splice it in the middle, because you need this extra little piece of line out here to control the water flow. Because if you just have this right on the soil surface like that, you're going to have all sorts of water just shooting out of there, because this is basically, you know, almost like a bubbler. You know, puts out 10 gallons of water in an hour. So in 1 hour, it'll, you know, that'll fill 2 5-gallon buckets. So that's a lot of water. So it just shoots right out. So especially with the 10 and the 5s, you want to avoid this setup here. All right, so that's the basics of how, you know, you can set up your tubing. Again, this is your 1/2-inch poly tube, this is your 1/4-inch spaghetti tube, and these are emitters, goof plugs, and connectors. So in the next video, we're going to go into a little bit more specifics about specialty drip irrigation line. So we're going to talk about things that have built-in emitters, things like dripper line, things like soaker hoses, and drip tape. So stay tuned for that in the next video. And if you want to learn how to use some of those more specific products, check out that video and we will have more information on that. But as far as the basics for how to actually connect emitters to your to your poly tube, this is basically how you want to do that. And there's 3 or 4 different ways you can do it, and you choose the one that you like to do the most. All right, so if you have any other questions on this video, if you have questions on poly tube, spaghetti tube, the different emitters, where to get them, that kind of thing, please leave comments down below, and I'll be happy to answer those questions as best as I can. But in the meantime, keep checking back. We're going to try to do more videos on drip irrigation, walking you through the basics on how you can keep your system maintained or how you can install the system yourself. So thanks again for checking out this video, and we will see you in the next one. So take care, folks. Bye-bye.